in heaven, hallowed be thy name. From the day that I was born again till now, there's one thing I've always been yearning from God, that God may teach me how to listen to Him. Yeah, it's so sweet to pray to God, it's so sweet to talk to God, but it's very sweet to listen from God, because one word from God will change our lives. And so I have 5 topics that, as I've been meditating, even as I've been researching on how to listen to God, that as I've come through my mind, and I want us together to go through them, and I know God will bless us. The first topic is, or the first point is, separation. For us to listen from God, for us to listen to what God is saying in our lives, we have to be separated. And that's why maybe we have prayer centers in our country that are so good. But I'm not talking about physical separation. I'm also talking about even mental separation. You have to be separated from the noise of the world. You have to be separated from the desires of the world. You have to be separated from what we are doing, even in our world. Maybe you are working, you can take a leave and just go and listen from God. Maybe even if you have a family, you are so busy. Sometimes it's good just to wake up very early in the morning and just to listen from what God is saying in our lives. Separation is very good. Sometimes our friends are the reason why we are not listening to God, what God is saying in our lives. It's good to be separated from your friends, just to listen from what God is saying. The second point is expectation. After you've been separated from the worldly noise, from our busy schedules, from what we do day in, day out, we have to be expectant. We have to have expectation in our hearts for what God is saying in our lives. And what do I mean by expectation? When you go to talk to God, you need to be very expectant from Him. You need to know what you are asking from God. Because we will only receive from God what we expect from God. And expectation is as important as separation. After we've been separated from the noise of the world, it is very important for us to be expectant from God. And how do we become expectant from God? Even when you are praying, sometimes it's good to have a notebook, because God can speak volumes. God speaks so much in our lives. We need to write down some things He's saying in our lives. Even as you go to Bible study, even as you go to a prayer session, it's good to have a notebook, because you're expectant to God. Anytime we're in the presence of God, either we go to when you are going to church, or even when you are going to pray, it's good to be expectant. It's good to expect something from God. And how do we do this? One of the best way to do this is to carry a notebook. Carry a notebook and a pen. Go to the presence of God and expect something from Him. Remember Haggai. Haggai, when he went to listen from God, there's one thing I love about him. The Bible says that God told him, write down these things. If God was to speak in our lives in this generation, even how we go to church, and God and God maybe comes to this point and tells us to listen and to write something, many of us will tell God to pause, go back to our houses, get notebooks and pens, so that we may listen from Him. It is always good to be expectant for God. Even as we go to church for our services, carry somewhere to write down. Carry a pen, so that this shows expectant hearts. This demonstrates our expectant heart when you go to the presence of God. So even if you have been separated, it's good to be expectant from Him. It's good to expect something from Him. Remember, when you expect nothing from God, He will always give you that. He'll always give you nothing. And remember, He's faithful, because that is what you expected from Him. Our third point is cooperation. Sometimes we feel that we are weak when we go to pray, that we can't pray alone. And this is one of the points of listening to God. And this is where we need fellowship. This is where we need friends. You must have 2 or 3 friends that you know can pray with you. Because sometimes you feel so weak to pray. Sometimes you don't even understand how to pray because of what you are going through. And now this is the time to bring in cooperation. Just text 2 or 3 of your friends. Just call them. Tell them, I'm going through this and I want you guys to help me pray. You might not listen, you might not receive from God. But if you have good friends who pray with you, they might help you, because they might have listened or God might have spoken to them. God might not have spoken to you, but I know one thing: when you pray with cooperation, God will have to speak to one of them, and I know they will share with you guys. Cooperation is one of the best and one of the most important ways for us to listen from God. And that is the beauty of fellowship. Even in our busy schedule, sometimes it's good to fellowship with brethren, hold hands together, pray together. God has, and I know one thing, because of his faithfulness, God will speak to one of us. And because of his faithfulness, when he speaks to one of us, that might be the way out in many of our troubles. So cooperation is so important even as we listen from God. It's good to have 2 or 3 friends that you know you can pray with. 2 or 3 friends that you know when you tell them you want to pray together, they are seriously praying for you and praying with you. And so our third point is cooperation. Our fourth point is desperation. Desperation is only having plan A when you go to God. You don't need plan B or C. You only need plan A. That God is the only answer. God is the only way out. You go to his presence desperate for his answer. You go to God and tell God, God, I know this is the only way out. I don't have any other plan. This is the only way out. A good example is Moses. Remember Moses when Pharaoh had freed the Israelites? And Moses, as he was walking away from Egypt to Canaan, the only thing that was before them was the sea. And when they looked back, Pharaoh was coming with his armies. And when he looks ahead, he sees the sea. The Bible tells us that Moses lifted up his stick and talked to God. In fact, the Bible says he cried to God. And this is what God told him. So Moses, stop crying. Lift up your hands, lift up your stick, and start walking. And this is what Moses did. Moses was desperate. What about us in our lives when we go to God? You need to go to God as plan A, as plan B, or as plan C. And one thing I want to urge us, please, let us go to God desperate. He's the only way out. He's the only way out. He's the only plan out. Either in our businesses, either in our families, those who are married, either in our marriages. We need God. Our last point is communication. That is one of, it's not the least because it's a small point. It is the last point but not the least point. Communication. Communication comes in a way like when you listen to God because you want to communicate it to others, God will trust you with that information because he knows one thing. It's not only for you alone, but even for other people to listen to. So when you go to the presence of God, you have separated yourself. You go with an expectant heart. You go with the cooperation. You go with a team. You go to God praying with a team. You go to God with a desperate heart. And only for communicating to other people, God will trust you with his word. Because he knows one thing. When he reveals something to you, he's revealing it to thousands. And sometimes we go to God and we feel it's so dry. And to other people, they go to God and it feels so easy for them. You have to look at their lives. These people go to God because they want to share it out. They want to go and encourage a brother. They want to go to pray with a family. They want to go and encourage other people. Communicate to other people. Communication is one of the best ways to listen from God. Go to God and tell God, God, I want you to give me this revelation because of this one thing, this other thing, and that other thing. So that God, I may communicate to my brothers. So that God, I may communicate with the fellowship. So that God, I may use it in church. So that God, I may communicate even at my workplace. And God in his faithfulness will trust you with that information. Why? Because you are ready to communicate it to other people. So separation, expectation, cooperation, desperation, and communication are the best keys for you to learn to listen to God.